Greetings, juniors. Wanted to take a few minutes to give you some information about your first upcoming competency assignments, the Systems Learning Integration paper. And so I'm going to start off with just kind of an introduction to APA writing, 7th edition. So if you have a manual, 7th edition manual, great. If you don't, you're probably going to need to get one because a lot of your assignments will be required for you to write them in APA, which is a very distinct and specific style. A lot of you have probably done some APA work in your community college and some of your other learning experiences. So this will be a refresher for those of you. And it's quite different from MLA. So let's go ahead and get started with what we're going to look at in terms of APA and what kind of things I'll be looking for when I start to grade papers. All right, so I'm going to skip the preliminaries about just kind of the origins of APA, but basically I will just kind of look at the formatting pieces. So, 8.5 by 11. So set your margins at 1 inch from the top, bottom, and sides. As a matter of fact, for those of you with PCs, if you have Word or Word 10 or any of those particular programs, Microsoft Office Online, there's a button in Word that will allow you to automatically set your template up for typing an APA style paper. The actual font that you'll be using is Times New Roman. So if you look up at the top of the page in your Word, you'll see the different types of writing styles in the font. So scroll to New Times Roman and in size 12. The entire paper is double spaced, so not single space, but double spaced. And every page is going to need a running header at the top with the exception of the title page. I'm going to pop through here, but here's an example of what a title page looks like. There's a way to, you want to start with your running header, so that will basically be kind of the name of your paper. What are you looking at? Your systems integration analysis paper, Frozen River, could be used as a running title. You'll always want to put, for your title, you want to look at making sure that you include the title of your paper, the name of your instructor. You'll also want to put in the College of St. Scholastica where it talks about your school. It's always advisable to also to maybe put in the class, Social Work 3370, Gentleman's Practice, name of the paper, your name, the name of your, not your name, I'm sorry, the name of the your name, the name of the instructor, and then the school. All right. You can also Google and look at examples of title pages, or you can look in your APA manual. There should be some there that will tell you what they need to look like. Also, we're not doing abstracts at this particular point in time. That'll happen for you probably in the spring semester when we're doing more research-based pieces. But basically wanted to make sure that we covered this piece in terms of this example paper here. So we got the running head title that should be there. All of your paragraphs need to be indented. I think it's a 1/2 inch is the rule. So as you start a new paragraph, make sure that it's indented. I've seen some papers where there's one gigantic paragraph that lasts throughout the whole page, and that's wrong. So you want to make sure that you're indenting as you need to, as you're changing subject matters, making sure that you're starting new paragraphs in a really timely manner. And then this is your reference page. And so your reference page needs to be in alphabetical order with a hanging indent, so looking much like this, depending on where you got it from. So obviously this person got his from a website with this first one, and so it's done there as well as the second one. So those are examples of what that title page might look like. So here's some other things you need to know about just kind of the CSS piece in terms of papers. What we're looking for in your APA style paper are the higher levels of learning. So we're wanting to see whether you comprehend the information, can you analyze, identify, and apply. So you've been reading for the last several weeks about systems theory, working with families, understanding the importance of culture, things of that particular nature. Now it's time to pull all of this together. And so if you can demonstrate that you actually understand it through this particular competency exercise, then we know that you've got it. Um, so again, most of our papers will not require an abstract, and we'll tell you when they do. You need to also understand that you need to be able to cite your particular work. Um, the difference with APA papers are that they're research papers. They want you to gather information about the subject matter from other sources, and they want you to cite them. So your textbook, the video lectures that I have done, if there are things that I have said that relate to the questions that you're trying to answer in the context of your paper, then you want to put that in and cite it. Again, so for the most part, we have done our video lectures via video. So there is a guide in your APA manual that tells you how to cite a video. Um, if there's something that I've told you, say during like personal communication, so if we were in lab and I gave you some information and you want to use that in your paper, then this example at the bottom here, R. Coleman, comma, personal communication, and the date that the communication actually occurred on. So the thing with APA papers is making sure that you give credit to the authors for the work that they have done, because you're basically finding that particular information, citing them, and giving them credit for the information that you got. Unlike a lot of different papers that you'll be writing, most of the time in an APA scholarly paper, no one is interested in what you're thinking. I know that sounds rude, but it's really true. We're only interested in you answering the question as well as providing a basis for your answer. So providing some evidence to support why you're putting in what it is you're putting in. And that's what you would use and then cite that. In this particular exercise, you're going to be citing the movie quite often because you're going to need to use examples from the movie. My advice to you also would be, as you are writing an APA style paper, that you write it as though you were writing it for someone who had no clue about the subject matter at all. And I say that because a lot of times students will write papers based on their instructor with the assumption that there's this knowledge, and we're saying, we want you to actually go a little bit deeper and be a little bit more explorative in terms of the things that you are doing in the course of that paper. So again, um, writing it from the standpoint and utilizing the things that you have learned through your readings, through your video lectures, through our conversations, to illustrate your understanding of the concept and the principle are going to be how that thing get done. And write it as though you're writing it for someone who has any clue. A hint for you in terms of how to do that would be as you are discussing a concept, for example, let's just say you're writing about the microsystem and you're writing about maybe a character in the microsystem. You might want to just decide, well, the microsystem is blah, 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 according to the authors of this particular book. So I would put the definition for what a microsystem actually is, then cite right behind that particular sentence using the author's last name, comma, and date of publication, and then go ahead and put an example of a microsystem in the paper. Like, here's an example of a microsystem, blah, 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 blah. That way you're explaining as you go along. And so that means that you're understanding it. And that means that a person who has no knowledge about this particular work should be able to pick up the paper, read it, have a basic understanding, as well as look at the reference sheet and know exactly where to find the information that they got it from. So again, look at your APA pieces to make sure that you've done that. If you're using word by word direct quote, make sure that there's a way that you actually cite that as well. If you're paraphrasing, which is taking what the author said, putting into your own words, but still give them credit for it. It's going to be very helpful for you in terms of doing it that way. So that's kind of the brief, go down and dirty on the APA. So let's shift gears here and look at the actual assignment. So hang on just a second. I'm going to go back and find what it is we are needing to do. Well, actually, before we do that, let me give you an example of what a good paper looks like. So here's a group paper that was done in policy. And then you'll notice all the things that I talked about earlier in terms of the writing header is here. The title of the paper This is a good format in terms of how it's laid out. These are the abbreviations for the students in terms of the names, because they didn't want to put all the names there. But for you, it would be your particular name here. So this is your title page, what it looks like. Here is this first page of this particular policy analysis that what they were doing. And so look at the indentations, look at making sure that uh, citing legal pieces have this italicized piece. Again, if you're doing that piece, and you won't have to do it in this first paper anyway, but if future papers result in that, that's fine. You'll notice the in-text citation, which means that this information, all of this information here, comes from Bump in 2014 publication. All right. 1870, when we start to look at this information, where did this come from? Students don't know this information. So no one was around in 1780 to understand what was happening in Pennsylvania, right? So the information obviously came from somewhere. It came from a publication or an author or a book. And so it's your job, is if you're using the information from that book, is to cite it the way that it's cited here. Last name of the author, comma, date of publication. So you'll notice here in this paper that every few sentences people are actually citing it. So even though it's the same work, what folks are doing is they're avoiding plagiarism. They're making sure that as I read the paper that I understand that everything that's here came from this particular source. And so that's how you want to do your APA papers at all times. So again, it's just kind of read through here. Here are different examples of the citation in terms of where the information came from, um, and how to cite that. So I'll know that everything here in this paper came from the source, and I should be able to go back and find it, is what we're actually doing here. So again, example of a good paper, good grammar, punctuation, all of those things you'll need to double check. Here's an example of an offset cite. Now, basically, or should I say a block cite. So what happens is anytime you're citing information from a source, a publication, a book, or so forth, and it's going to be more than 40 words long, then you have to do a special indent and do it like this, and then cite it here at the end, so I'll know exactly where they came from. So again, pay attention to the number of words that are in your actual citation that you're pulling, because if they're more than 40, it needs to be cited this way. I literally go through and count words in the citation. If it's more than 40, then you'll get dinged for like, well, you didn't cite this the proper way. So just make sure that you do that in terms of that piece as well. Um, so the rest of the paper, as you can see, where this information is coming from, very well written paper. Here's another blocked citation because it's more than 40 words. A lot of stuff came from the NASW. There was stuff that came from their critical race theory book. They did some pieces around constitutional law. So again, as you can see, very well written paper in terms of this, the information and the citation. So here's the reference page. You can see that things are in alphabetical order. You can see how the hanging indents are there. And all of the sources that they utilize in the paper. So if you cite something in your paper, as you've gotten out of a source, it needs to show up on your reference page. If you cite something that's not on your reference page, it's going to be an error, or if you put something on your reference page that's not cited, it's going to be an error. So make sure that you follow through with those things as well too. So that's just an example of what a good paper looks like in terms of that. Of course, your paper will be different because there'll be questions to guide you through what you need to actually be looking at. All right, so let's go to the actual assignment now. So I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to go to the systems analysis assignment that's going to be due on October 6th. So here's what your assignment is. It's a 30 pages, 30-point assignment. APA, probably 6 to 7 pages, not including your title page. I just want to throw that piece in there. So what you will need to do this particular assignment is this. Under your course resources, there is a link to the movie Frozen River that was done back in 2008. You will, in your case analysis, you're going to basically need to answer the questions that are below and make sure that your questions line up with the topic pieces that are actually there. You're going to be graded according to critical thinking. How are you thinking through this particular process? How well are you incorporating the readings and the course content as well as additional research that you will do? You also will your grade will be determined by all of these things that are here: grammar, spelling, the whole 9 yards. So keep that in mind. You're going to need two sources. One of them can be your actual textbook. The other one you will need to find on your own. I would suggest going to the library, the database at the library, and find articles that relate to the subject matter. And if we have time, I'll go through and I'll show you how to get to the library as well. It's online. So first thing you want to do is look at these particular questions. And so you want to answer these questions in the perspective, because we're looking at a systems analysis, we're looking at micro, we're looking at meso, and we're looking at macro. And so the questions here are as follows. So, what specific interview skills would be important? So based on the lectures, based on what you read, what does it say about what you need to do an interview? Um, how do you assess family strengths? So what are the things that the family is able to do well in terms of how they connect with each other, in terms of the assets and the ethics that they may have? What are some of the individual challenges or barriers that we've got here? And then give some examples of what you saw in the movie that relate to grief, loss, or cultural context that you need to be sensitive to when you're engaging clients. So basically, who this client is, what their nationality is, where they come from, their socioeconomic status, all those things will have an impact in terms of how I engage with them. Tell us how you address self-determination and empowerment in your connection with them. How do you look at how self-determined people are, and how do you start to help move them towards more of that? What would be the most challenging for you in this engagement process? So now, out of all the questions here, um, you're going to actually choose a character out of the movie, and then you're going to look at describing who this character is and what you would do in terms of how you would answer these first 5 questions as it relates to what you would do with this particular character. Again, keeping in mind that you want to utilize the things that you have read, the things that you heard in the um, video lectures, to be citing the information that you're going to actually use. Um, the last question says, what would be the most challenging for you in the engagement process? That's a personal question. So in this area, you don't need to have a citation. So you basically is asking you for what your opinion is in terms of what would be most difficult for you. So it's easy to start a sentence by saying, in the opinion of this writer, or I believe these are the things that would be the most challenging for me in this process, then outline those. I would suggest that you maybe break your paper into different sections. The micro perspective could be a topic, a heading that you would put in your paper, and then answer the questions beneath that. Um, Also, moving into the meso or the family unit, you're going to want to also look at these questions in terms of what major conflicts or problems that you are seeing with it as it relates to this family. One of the video lectures specifically talks about family problems. Now, I'll give you kind of a freebie here. Most people tend to lean on the fact that in the course of the movie, you learn that the father has abandoned his family and he has a significant gambling problem, and he took savings for them that they were utilizing to buy a house. So I want you to recognize that we understand that that's a big issue, but a lot of times what students will do is they keep repeating the same information over and over about, well, the family's poor and the dad ran off and abandoned. Make that statement one time, move on, but then that's not the whole context of all the problems that they're having. There are other issues that are happening within the context of the family that you choose actually to do your analysis on. So making sure that you do that. Giving examples of things that if you decide that there's this type of an issue going on or conflict going on with this particular family, then give an example of how you saw that it play out in the movie. So playing back a conversation, mom may have said this to the kid at this particular point in time, and then cite the movie as a source of where that information came from. Look at what the strengths that naturally occur in that family are. Look at what the family barriers and challenges are. So the entire family, not just one individual, because we're looking at the meso perspective. Then as you're looking at the movie, you'll also notice that there are beliefs and values that is demonstrated for this family, whether they're healthy values or whether they're unhealthy family. Give some examples of what you saw that fit into that particular piece, and quote the movie as a result of that as well too. And then the macro perspective, which is a larger piece, is that you're looking at the community demographics. What kind of things have you seen in the movie, in the background? Who are some of the characters dealing with? What are some of the situations that you can derive from just looking at the surroundings in which people live and how they go about their day to day? Look at what challenging economic factors there might be. Give some examples of it. Um, Give at least two community issues that are evident in this story. So, what did you see happening in this community that's a community issue that you might want to address? And then identify how you would approach um, identifying these problems as well as the needs that arise from these issues. So chapter 5 will be helpful for you in terms of that. And then finally, your self-reflection, which is the last piece. What would you find the most difficult about working with these characters? What actions would you need to address to challenge effective helper behavior? So again, this last section is more about your opinion. So it's about, there's no need to cite here unless you use information in your analysis in your section reflection that you something that you read about. So that literally is your paper. It's gonna be answering these questions. A lot of times, again, I would suggest that you utilize the micro, meso, macro, and self-reflection as kind of your subheadings in your paper and answer the questions underneath. Um, um, Actually, if you want to, and it makes it might be easier because there are so many questions under each section, is simply put that question in your paper and then answer that. Each one of these particular areas, say for an example in the micro. And then once you have a sufficient answer that's well written, that's typed out good, that has a proper source, then go back in and take those particular questions out of the paper. So you'll just have a paragraph format. It's the easiest way to make sure that you cover everything because I'll be looking to make sure you answer each and every question in some form or fashion and be real clear about it. One of the other things that folks tend to do when they are writing this paper is they tend to actually tell me the story. So, mom did this, and then Lila did this, and then TJ did this, and therefore there was this, and all of those particular things. So, I'm going to ask you to refrain from telling me the movie. I've seen it a million times, I already know what's going to happen. So, don't, if you find yourself repeating kind of what was happening in the movie, you're kind of missing the mark. I want you to focus on answering the actual question as it relates to the information that you got from the movie. So there's a different piece in terms of that as well. So making sure that you're real clear about not retelling the movie, but basically answering the questions based on the system's perspective. All right. I think there is one other thing that I want to share with you all in terms of how I will be grading these papers. So we have a rubric. It is also a part of your assignment. And so if you want to get the maximum points, and I know you all do, then I'm going to be looking for answers or the way your paper is put together that falls into this particular category. You need to be able to demonstrate critical thinking. It needs to be organized. I'll send you a critical thinking cheat sheet just so that you can kind of have an idea about what those kind of things are. Um, Demonstrating the professional use of self. So there will be parts of this paper where you'll be asked to be the social worker. How would you intervene? What would you do? Those kind of things. Looking at how you would pay attention to culture and diversity. So those are all things that I will be looking for in this particular paper. And so as you can see, these are the competencies around interviewing skills, around knowledge of interviewing skills, around understanding the application of systems theory, looking at the strength-based perspective. These are all things that I will be looking at here for all of you. And then also the overall organization flow using at least a minimum of two academic sources when you cite your paper and doing your reference page as well too. So doing all of those particular things will yield you these 30 points that you will need. So just to make sure that we understand that piece as well too. So the other thing to keep in mind is what I typically do is I will do a series of drafts. So your first paper draft of this paper will be due by October the 6th. And what I will do is I'll make every effort to mark it up for you and send it back to let you know what's missing, what's wrong, and give you an opportunity to fix it before I actually submit the paper for a final grade. Um, I would say do your writing. I would say don't try to proofread your writing as you're going along. It just makes it more confusing for you. Write your thoughts, write the answers for every particular area that you're doing. Go back at a later date and then look at the mistakes that you may have made. One easy way to rectify your mistakes is to actually read the paper out loud. If you read the paper out loud after having not worked on it for a day or so, the mistakes that you're making will become apparent. And so you'll hear them as you read it back. And so it won't make sense what you might be trying to say because you're trying to proofread and write the paper and do all the things at the same time. And I would say do them in different sections. Write it, proofread it later. You can always go back and edit it. I would suggest also that you start early. You've got a couple of weeks before this is due, but I wouldn't wait till the last moment. I would just start on it now, maybe a couple of pages here and there every other day or so until you start to pull your paper together in terms of that. Be very careful with commas. Be also very careful with run-on sentences. I see a number of run-on sentences. And so if you're typing a paper and you have got one sentence that 3, 4, or 5 lines long, I can already tell you without looking at it, it's going to be a run-on sentence. You're trying to cover too much information in one sentence. I would stick to either covering one concept, maybe no more than two, and then moving on to another sentence before you start that piece. Otherwise, you use commas inappropriately, and they become a splice, and then you'll have a run-on sentence which will be grammatically inappropriate. So, and I will note those things. I'd also encourage you to do your first draft on a Word document because I will take a look at all of those documents and I will mark them up and I will send them back to you with the things that you need to redo in terms of that. So one other thing that I'm going to try and find here for you all, so as we think about this second reference, is going to the actual library. So let me get back to my landing page, which I'm going to have to log back out to do that. So bear with me for just a second. I don't want that. I want to get back in. All right. So let's see. Library distance students. All right, so if you'll go here and you can just do a quick search, it will have the information that you need about accessing the library. So there's a welcome video, there's accounts that you can do, there are all kinds of tutorials that will help you find things as well. So I would say look at this particular site. I'm going to see if I can get into let's see, I think it's LibGuides. So if you're looking for, let's go to your databases here. I would say the one that we use a lot is Solar. Let me see. I don't get in here very often, but as you can see, and these databases are just kind of clearinghouses for um, social services. So you can look at subjects. I'm trying to think here. Social work, for example. Sound decks. So these are some of the popular ones as it relates to social work practice that you can actually utilize. And so what we'll do is try and see about searching a database. So let's see what happens if we type micro system. Okay, there's nothing in there about microsystems. That's deep. Let's see. We have any in those databases. So let's view all databases. So let's go microsystems again. Go. I'm not finding anything. Why is it doing this to me? Let me try something else. go, 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 go. I am not finding anything in these databases. So, all right, so this is like not being very helpful at all here. So here's what I would suggest that you do, since again, I don't get into the database or use it very much in terms of those kind of things. Um, if you can get to, well, actually, we're at Solar. This is good. So Solar will probably help me do this. So let's do microsystems again. If I could spell, if I could type, it'd be even better. All right. Should probably broaden, or should I say narrow my search a little bit, because it's probably going to pull back like a trillion articles. All right, so you can see what happens here is it pulls up everything that's talking about microsystems. So um, I would probably need to be more specific and say maybe microsystems in family theory or systems theory in working with families. But this gives just an example. So you can play around with these different system pieces and come up with words. So let me try to think about, like, say, family problems. See what comes up. Search and see what's there. Must be a lot of people at the library today. All right, so here are, for example, issues around family issues. So if you wanted to cite something in the paper about issues of family that you found, or if you want to think about like things working with a specific population, so a Native American population, one of the characters in the movie is Native American. So maybe family issues and working with Native American systems. So you can see here that you've got a ton of different articles that you can utilize. You can narrow your search by looking at the types of articles you want, whether it's a full text, whether it's a peer reviewed. You can set a date range for, like, I only want articles between 2000 and 2020. So it'll pull up all of the newer stuff. You can do magazines, you can do reviews, you can do the whole nine yards. So this will be a really helpful tool for you in terms of being able to get into finding those resources on your own, because again, you're going to need two resources, or should I say APA cited sources to do your paper. Also, there's a video that introduces you to the library, and then the distance librarian, um, Julia Rawlstad, is a very, very, very user-friendly individual. You can send her an email, you can text her, you can arrange to set up a meeting with her online, and she can show you how to navigate that system pretty much at any point in time. So I know this has been I know this has been a lot, but this is your first competency assignment. Competency assignments are must pass, so we've got to get it right. You'll get a couple of different shots to do it. And so make sure you look at this video as much as you need to, have your manuals out. And I would also suggest that as you are watching the movie, I would actually have my assignment questions there and start making notes for myself about what you're saying in terms of how you might want to answer some of those questions as well. So with that, I'm going to stop yapping, and good luck to you on your first paper. If you have any questions or other concerns I need to meet, shoot me an email, shoot me a text, and we can set up something via Zoom. Talk to you soon. Bye.